Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Today I'm talking with David Bourne. David, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. And thank you, Craig, for this series. I've listened to several of them, and I just think it's awesome
Thank you.
that you're doing this and how you do it. So, really appreciate you having me
Totally
on.
selfish. I'm doing it just because it's fun. It's awesome to talk to people. I love. Um, you've been in Akimbo courses. I've been in Akimbo courses, and
Hmm.
there's the moment where you pass. I'm going to say you pass someone in the hall. It's all virtual. You pass somebody in the hall, and you're like, "Ooh, I'd like to talk to that person some more." So the big part of the podcaster community, these interviews and these conversations, these chances to connect, is just I want to circle back and talk to all the people that I didn't get a chance to talk to. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that you recognize that it's cool and that you appreciate it. So, but like I said, thanks for joining me.
sure.
Let's start by talking about the seasons. So you're in Western North Carolina. I had the privilege of visiting North Carolina. I had only ever been to what I'm going to say is like the seaside, Eastern North Carolina. I've been
Hmm.
there a few times. I have some friends there, and it's in some sense it's very much like Pennsylvania where I am, except it's a little flatter and sandier. But when I drove to
Hmm.
Western North Carolina, I was like, oh, this is not rural, but this is beautiful. It's more than rolling hills. It's
Hmm.
mountains and valleys and evergreen and deciduous. So I'm my first question is I was there like very briefly, like for 2 days. What are your thoughts on the seasons there? Like when you move into a
Hmm.
place, I don't mean a home, but when you move into a new region or a new area, it's going to take a few years for you to get a feel for like what are winters like, what are summers, does this place have four real seasons? And I'm just
Yeah.
wondering what your read is on how are the seasons there, how are the spaces, the big open spaces there, how does that play into your personal seasons and cycles?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we have four seasons for sure. They're very distinct, and we have hot summers
Mm-hmm.
and cold winters, the spring, which is where we are now, the beginning of spring, my favorite time of the year. It's full of flowers. It's full of green, bright, just just joyful growth. And then the fall is probably the most visited time of um, of the seasons here because the fall colors with the leaves are just stunning. And I live in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a tourist town surrounded by the southern Appalachian Mountains. It is pretty much the oldest mountain chain in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and because we're in the South, we do get those four seasons. And I love that question because I'm trying to tap more and more into that thing, meaning that the cycle of the seasons of the critters and the plants that we see. I feel like as human beings, that is literally part of us and how we got here. And we're kind of living like zoo animals indoors, which is very comfortable.
In denial.
Yeah,
Right.
it's comfortable, but we're missing out on a lot. And I think those of us who do go outside, uh, regularly, intentionally, we're like, wow, this is awesome. And
This is awesome
so,
in the way it should be. Yeah.
yeah. And no, I don't want to go live in the woods. Uh, I love my house and my electronic gear. Uh,
And the
very
roof
attached.
and the
Yeah.
windows, right.
And the heat.
And the mosquito screens. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not knocking all that, but we're definitely, we're in a place where we've gotten an imbalance.
Mm.
And the ecological environmental situation we're in is the biggest proof of that. Um, we won't go into that direction, but uh, yeah. So I think what I'm trying to do to answer your question a little bit more specifically, I'm trying to daily, regularly connect with the outdoors. I've got a short form
Mm.
podcast I call The Davo Show. It's named after one of my internal characters and my artistic character. And the point of that is to, like, if I'm out there and I hear something, I'll start recording and then I'll start talking. And the idea is that, like this show here, the idea is to reduce the friction of post, meaning
Yeah.
the editing and the publishing. Still working on that, but get it out there
Right.
and let it be what it's going to be, and intentionally trying to do that with nature related content.
Mm.
For one, because I believe that others could benefit from that, but I know I could benefit from it.
Right.
So it's been great.
This may sound tangential. What would you say is your primary sense? Like when you go out, you step out of your house. I'm in a suburban neighborhood. You can't really see out my window because it's actually so sunny today. I have to close the curtains.
Hmm.
Um, but it's 20 feet to the next house. And then if you walk a quarter mile, you're into a large, like 1,000-acre wildlands conservancy on actually the
Wow.
same Appalachian Mountains running through my area. So I can hike up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like a whopping 150 feet high is all that's left of the mountain. But there's some small rocks up there where you can boulder. So I don't go out
Cool.
literally every day, but I try to go out every day, go for a walk, go for a hike, go for, some rock climbing.
Great.
And when you go outside, when you walk out of your domicile, right, like the environment is completely different. And when you step out, I'm wondering which of your senses do you think you settle into first? Touch, sight, sound, smell.
Do I settle into? That's a good question. Well, I have been a video guy since my early 20s. And so I'm a very visual person.
Hmm.
But being a video guy, you have to learn audio. And you quickly learn that if you're creating a video, that the audio is actually where the story is told. And so as a podcaster, um, the audio, it's kind of like the background soundtrack to our lives, in the sense that it's, um, I don't know. I think visual is more of a top mind, like a frontal lobe thing, and audio is
Hmm.
more of a subconscious thing. Like if the mountain lion is behind you,
Yeah.
that part of your consciousness is always working. In fact, it's working in your sleep, and that's, it keeps us safe. And so it's probably part of, the lizard brain that Seth Godin talks about so much. So I guess as I'm on this exploration to try to learn more about myself and just the human psyche, I'm
Hmm.
more interested now in the audio. I still love the visual, and that flower that's those that are popping up out of the ground. I hope they're popping up for you like they are for me. But man, my eye goes to that, and I immediately like, oh, I got to go look at that.
Hmm.
Um, but what I've been doing lately is trying to sit on my back porch and just listen. And I've really, that's really changed me in some big ways, to give that time. Because when I look out over the woods in my backyard, I live next um, to the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is a national park, uh, which is fantastic. I mean, love, love, love that.
Yeah.
The visual doesn't change much. The trees are swaying, and there might be some birds come in and out, but the audio is always changing. And so, uh, the owls, so for some reason, have really captured me. I don't hear them that often, but when I do, I'm
Hmm.
like, just a visceral clunk just happens in my chest. that's my next podcast that I'm working on is trying to figure that one out. Um,
I
so
wonder if
that's
you have you given any thought to we're weaving visual and audio in the discussion here, and I had a conversation once with a gentleman who was talking about, and I'm not a guru at eyes, but he was talking about how in order for your eyes to focus, I hope I have this right, to focus close, that requires muscular contraction to make the lens work so you can read up close. And to focus at an effectively infinite distance is a relaxed position for your eyes focusing muscles.
uh,
And I hope I have that right. And
that makes
the point
sense.
that he made was that if you are in a built space, so you're in this room at most, I have 15 feet, across the room to my left. But when I'm looking at my computer, it's 3 feet at most. So if you
Hmm.
spend all your time indoors, his point was you're always holding this particular level and variations of a mostly contracted muscle tension in your eyes. Doesn't
Interesting.
sound like much because they're tiny little muscles. But his point was one of the things that he felt was transformative for him, like was when he walked outside and I always talk
Hmm.
about like video, like racking focus. It's like you release the tension in your eyes and
Hmm.
like your focus literally drifts as your eye shape relaxes and it drifts out to the treetops, to the horizon, to whatever is the farthest thing away that you can see, to the clouds, to the plane overhead.
Hmm.
And I said to him, "Oh, I had never really thought about that, but I have noticed, not ever noticing that I also tend to look up. And when I walk out the front door and look up, it turns into a thoracic extension because you're like,
Yeah.
oh, and like I'm like gazing away from my microphone. But when I look up like that, in combination with the visual relaxation, it just settles through like your whole body and
Hmm.
gives you that physical grounding.
Hmm.
So I'm notorious for rambling, but my question
No,
is,
I get it.
aside
I'm
from
with
what are your
you.
thoughts on all that, but you were talking about treetops, and I'm thinking, I wonder if you've ever noticed where your attention goes first when you first walk outside. Does it go to the ground? Does it go to the
Hmm.
middle distance? Does it go up to the treetops to see what the sky is up to?
Well, I can tell you that it does not go to the treetops, and this is why I know this. When I walk outside, um, I have been surprised. Like this owl, for example, we have them, we hear them, not all the time, but they live here. And
Right.
I I walked out a few months ago, and there was an owl that flew off, and we have hawks that flew off, and I'm like, that
Mm.
gummit, I could have seen that had I been looking up. Um, so I'm definitely not looking up by default. I guess I'm looking as would be safe. You're trying to, if you're moving, you're looking where you're going. We do have we have bears in the area, and bears will leave you alone pretty much. Um, but I've walked out the door and there's been a bear nearby, um, but there's nothing dangerous. But sometimes I'll remember, oh yeah, there might be a bear out there, especially at
Yeah,
night.
there's an instinct to look down, to look around.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I really hadn't thought about that, except for that thinking, oh, well, I need to not scare away some cool hawk or owl that might be sitting out there on the branch. But yeah, I like that idea you mentioned about the eyes and the looking up. Remind me of Amy Cuddy's book where she talks about our body position determining our emotional state, and if we want to get in a great emotional state, we go outside, raise our arms up, look up, kind of in the
Mm.
victory position. She's actually seen people uh, find great benefit doing that, like PTSD
Mm.
sufferers, and hunched over our phones, as we tend to do in our
Yeah.
zoo,
Yeah.
in the zoo, looking at our screen. We're not even looking at the 15 feet of walls, Craig. We're
Mm.
just looking at our screens.
Yeah, 18 inches.
You know?
I'm reminded of, what was it? So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, Douglas Adams' book, where he had a character who built an asylum, except the asylum was for the world. And when you
Mm,
approached his home, he lived near the shore. When you approached his home, the part of the house you were looking at was a furnished open, like a colonnade, like you're looking at carpeting and you're looking at walls with artwork. It's just wide open to you, and there's like an inside ceiling tipped up. And when you open the door, it's an exterior door, you're on looking at the inside of the door. You open the door, it opens out, and you step into the square, like an enclosed space. And this guy had kind of, ironically built an asylum for the world. And the only place that was outside the asylum was the square area, what we would say inside his home. But the
mm,
inside square area had the external siding and the gutters were there. It was like the house was inside out. Just
mm.
reminds me of the idea of like, yes, there's
Yeah.
an asylum, and how do I get out of it?
Well, I think it's all about just trying to be conscious, whatever it is you're doing, personal growth. Just trying to remember, oh, yeah, there's a better way to do
Yeah.
anything. But um, getting out of that closed-minded box that we tend to get in.
Mm.
Finding things to help us get out. Like this podcast is a great example. You're trying to expand conversations, talk
Mm.
to people you haven't talked to. Uh, it's just, we live in an amazing time where, on the one hand, technology's increasingly taking over our lives, but hopefully there are going to be more of us thinking, you know what? Okay, yeah, tech's great, but I want to go outside, and the pandemic helped with that, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people got their heads adjusted.
I
I
hope
I'm always
so.
hesitant to say anything good came out of the pandemic, but a lot of people realized just how out of control their usage of, well, most people don't use technology. Most people allow themselves to be used by technology. I have to check. I have a soapbox about social media. Make sure I'm not on it. I'm not on it. Um, but I think people began to realize, like, okay, every time I open my phone, I get stressed out. So I think I need to figure out how to control that. So
Mm,
I think people got a wake up call that way. People realize just how unimportant most people's jobs. Like, I used to go to this job all the time. It was a big deal. Oh, it's urgent. I'm like, I haven't been there in 3 weeks. Doesn't seem like the world ended. So I think it was a good
hmm.
reset in that sense. But we'll see whether
Yeah,
people rush back. I don't know. I'm in the Northeast, traditional Northeast corridor, and the traffic is back to normal, and the people are
yeah,
back to normal, and so we'll
yeah.
see. How
Well,
about one last random? Since I have a bit of visual info, I can see stars is a thing. I'm wondering. I'm betting you're probably got some good dark skies. So talk to me a little bit about the night sky and stars, both
hmm.
in your personal experience of them where you are, and maybe what your thoughts are on how looking up at night seems to consistently transport people to a higher state of consciousness, to a deeper thought process.
Wow. Yeah. What can I say about that? All right. Well, so for the last couple of years, I have been focused on what a lot of people call the change cycle. It's this cyclical thing we see in nature. We started talking
Mm-hmm.
about the four seasons. So, uh, the North Star is a good metaphor for the higher self. The call it what you will, but um, that part of us that we intuitively know is our best self. And so I think it's a great metaphor because the North Star is always in one spot, and it's for those of us who live in the northern hemisphere, that is. And so it's always there. This better part of us, this part of us that we tap into when we go on a hike, or when we even look at something beautiful. Maybe it's a piece of artwork. Um, maybe it's a flower sitting on the desk in the kitchen, or it's always there.
Hmm.
And so that night sky and looking up at the vastness, I feel like, okay, well, that's inside us, that vastness. And again, circling back to this type of conversation that you're doing with this podcast, that's part of the vastness, because when you and I talk, yeah, we're just two people spouting off ideas, but um, really, we're making the opportunity to connect in a deeper way. And podcasting allows us to do that. We can find people who just have this vast depth, and they just, I think about Rich Roll, who's somebody
Yeah, it's a good podcast. If people just went,
yeah,
what? Look up the Rich Roll podcast.
yeah. I mean, that guy has figured it out. He's built a great business, career, life around having conversations. Yeah, they're 2 hours long. uh, but it's like looking up at the North Star, it's like, um, because inevitably there'll be something in a conversation where I'll go, oh, that sounds like truth. And I think a North Star, that vastness of the night sky, is a deeper truth there.
Hmm.
And so for my work, which you can find at davidbourne.com, Bourne, my work has, finally, I'm 53 years old. I finally realized, this is what I want my work to be about. And I struggle with understanding, like, why am I so interested in tech? Why am I so interested in in nature? How am I going to bring all this together? Well, now I'm doing life coaching, which is sitting down with people one on one and just pushing this ball forward of making a better life,
Hmm.
whatever that means to someone else. And so, Martha Beck, who I'm studying with her, she wrote a book called Finding Your North Star. And I found that about 6 months ago. And I'm like, wow, there it is, So, and that synchronicity of things like that happening in your life, um, where here's this conversation that we're having. I didn't intend for it to go here, but you started talking about stars. Well, that North Star idea, man, that's been a big part of my life for the last 2 years. And so it's a perfect analogy for I think what we're both doing, which is just exploring, expanding,
Hmm.
looking for that sense of awe and wonder, that's out there if you choose to look.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great observation. Uh, my mind is dredging up all this Huxley's metaphor of island universes about each person is an island universe. I'm just thinking, hey, it was a delight to get the chance to paddle over to your island universe, visit you for 20 some minutes. And I'll get out of your hair now. So, but more seriously, thank you for taking the time. I had a chance to talk with you, I think, very briefly on a call once before, but this was a distinct pleasure. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Keep doing what you're doing. And, the podcaster community that you've initiated is awesome. As I dig in deeper into podcasting, I'm going to dig in deeper to that. So I appreciate you doing that. And, like I said, selfishly, I'll say you can find me at davidbourne.com. And yeah, man, let's keep this ball rolling.